Welcome to the British Sitcom History Podcast. My name is Gareth, and with me today, as always, is Alan.
Hello.
And also, because this episode is a film spin-off episode, we also have Saul. Welcome, Saul.
Hello.
So we are going to talk about a film that we have all watched, based on a sitcom that we watched in our last series, Please Sir. So, Saul, we've already talked, our listeners have heard us talk about the series Please Sir. Have you got any experience of the sitcom?
Only the same as is usually the case with me, where I watched one or two episodes specifically to give the film context several years ago when I was going through every Britcom movie I could find for some reason. So no, really. My understanding of Please Sir was the joke was we're going to get a load of adults and put them in, school uniforms and have them pretend to be kids. And when I got to the end of this film, is that actually the joke, or did they just hire a load of 20-year-olds to play 16-year-olds?
I don't think it's a knowing irony. I think it's just they just hired actors who were too old.
That's fascinating because I remember there was a show in the 90s, I think, or possibly the early noughties that was it was like, we're going to get a load of 30 and 40-year-olds to play like junior school children, and that is the joke. That is the irony. They're doing.
I think you're looking for hidden depths here. I don't think that's at all.
It was so absurd to me when I first saw this, and I've been in my early 20s, I guess, that I just thought, oh yeah, that's obviously a knowing, surreal element to this show, and watching it again, it was this slow realization of, oh, this isn't meta. This is just
no, it's not meta.
Just bad. It's just not well done. Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Well, Alan, why don't you, because we already talked about the series, when was the film made in the sequence of the series?
So the film was shot in 1971, which in the context of the series was after series 3.
Was that the final series?
That's the final one with the original cast, right?
They did 3 series of Please Sir with a particular set of school children, and that was essentially the end, and then it kind of broke off into we followed the school kids.
The Next Generation.
Well, no, we followed the kids and they go off into a different show called The Fen Street Gang, and that ran for a couple of series, which was them like after school. And then we also stay with the school, and series 4 of Please Sir was the same teachers and everything, but then a different school kids, and it was really not good at all. It was it didn't come together in any way. But they did try and continue it. But yes, this film was made after series 3, and so it's the original cast. But contextually, we have, for example, in this film, the teacher, Mr. Hedges, meets Penny, a young lady, and they sort of fall for each other. In the series, she is already his fiancée, and they've been together for quite a while. So this is supposed to be a kind of, we're jumping back in time to the school year. This is something that happened. Because in the context of the series, the school year is finished and the children have moved on.
Yeah, it doesn't quite hold up. Can I tell you something funny? When we first see Penny, she's driving a car and she gives one of the boys, Wesley, is hitchhiking. She gives him a lift. And I was like, I know that actor. Where do I know her from? Oh, it's driving me mad. And I watched the whole film and I couldn't quite place where I'd seen her. And it was driving me so mad that I went and looked on IMDb, and it turns out, she was in Please Sir that I watched 2 months ago.
Yeah, that'll do it.
That's how memorable the character was.
Can I ask a question about that? Because when we first meet that character and she's in the car, I thought she was an air hostess on her way to the airport. Which she's wearing but then next time we see her, she's working behind the bar in the pub.
It's the 60s. It's the swinging 60s. Everyone dresses as air hostess.
Was that the fashion? People dress like air stewards?
No, so in the TV series, she does work I think she just works at the airport rather than as an air hostess. She's like on the desk.
Okay.
And then I guess it's like her dad's pub and she helps behind the bar or something. I don't know. I don't think it's ever properly explained, but
I think,
yeah.
didn't she say her dad owned the
might
pub?
have gone. All right.
Maybe. So the film actually got released in November 1971. The new series, so Series 4 of Please Sir and Series 1 of The Fen Street Gang both started in September. So they were on TV at the time when this film came out.
So it wasn't like a sabbatical period for the TV series. They were still cracking on independently.
Yeah. Well, this was filmed in the gap between series, so they just churned it out and got it out as soon as they could, I guess. Basically, Please Sir, as people knew it and liked it, had finished. And so this film was a bit of a capper on it. It did sort of limp on as a kind of zombie series for a while. Yeah. But yeah, ultimately this is This is a film after the series kind of vibe.
What's the production company that make this then? Is it the same people who make the TV program, or are they busy making a TV program?
It was produced by LWT, so London Weekend Television. So yes, that is who made the series. Although in the credits they're listed as LWI Productions. So that's something like that's their film conglomerate or something. It's illegal for legal reasons. That's the production company. And the other producer named is Leslie Grade.
Is that Lou Grade?
It's Lou Grade's younger brother.
Oh.
So Lou Grade was a sort of a theatre impresario who then moved into television and film and all sorts of things. But they started out as a theatrical agent dealing with actors and whatnot. So Leslie Grade was Lou Grade's younger brother who was also in the business and is not a Lord of the Realm. So obviously wasn't quite as successful.
Impresario minor.
Yes, exactly. He had a stroke in the 60s, and so he didn't quite have as much of an active role in the company, and his son Michael Grade took over. Yes. So Leslie Grade is Michael Grade's dad.
Okay.
This is an interesting little bit of sort of history in this. I'm not quite sure how he got involved in this. Lou Grade and their people, they were part of ATV, Associated Television, who were one of the ITV franchises.
Yeah, one of the ITV regions, yeah.
They ran London television at weekends until LWT got the franchise in 1968. I didn't know. So they got kind of kicked out for LWT, and then this Please Sir was one of LWT's first shows that kind of they did. So I'm not quite sure how that's all connected. I guess it's all just quite incestuous and production companies working on one thing or another. Mm-hmm. But it's Leslie Grade, just his name. It's not a production company or anything like that. So I'm not quite sure exactly. Did he just put some money in? Was he more directly involved? I'm not sure.
What about the writers and the directors, the creatives behind this film? Is it the same people?
It is. So Esmond and Larby, as we talked about in the series, looking at the series, they did write this as well. It is all new material. It's not kind of cobbled together from old stuff.
That's very true. We have seen that, haven't we, with some of these movies? It's just great.
I was going to ask about that, yeah.
Yeah, no, it is all new stuff. And also directed by Mark Stewart, who directed the show. Mm-hmm. Which is slightly more unusual because directing for film is a very different beast to directing for studio-based work. Yeah, and as we talked about in our look at the series, Mark Stewart, a bit of a tyrant, was definitely a bit of an old school scream at everyone and tell them what to do.
That's the vibe you want on a school set thing where everyone's
that's it. There was a lot of young actors who were a bit rambunctious, so I think he had to lay down the law a bit.
But I think it's actually quite common from what I've seen for British sitcom movies to retain a director from the show. Certainly Alpha Papa and things like that all make use of people that are well known on British TV. Well,
back in the old days it was less common because your studio-based producer-director sits in the booth and talks to the VT operator going, okay, go to camera 1 now, go to camera 2 now.
Yeah, different format entirely, isn't it? And different medium, I guess, if you go into film stock from... Yeah.
Plus there was, I'm not quite sure of the details of this, but there was definitely a difference. Like, you had a TV union card and a film union card. You couldn't necessarily work on film if you were part of the TV union and vice versa. Like, I'm not quite sure what the details of that. But I definitely remember reading something, they couldn't use the director because he didn't have the right union affiliation or some such thing.
So the film itself, we're going to go through it, not scene by scene, but we'll work through it chronologically. But it is basically Please Sir, Go on Holiday, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, but we sort of make a joke of that. But the whole point is, let's get them out of this small space that we have to be in. We have the facilities, we have the budget. Let's do something more interesting with them. And this is completely, justified contextually. I think it's perfectly valid.
I think it's a great premise for a film, really, because, like you say, it's the biggest you can take this idea without breaking the world and making it something that it isn't.
Yeah.
And it's completely organic, Any bigger than this, and you have to get into, they become hostages in a siege. Got Alpha Papa on the brain.
They've still got to be enclosed and under the care of the teachers, otherwise it doesn't work. But then, that's the Fence Street Gang, isn't it? Which I guess we said doesn't work, so there you go.
That was the issue with the In-Betweeners movie, in part. I think it really lacked for Mr. Gilbert not being on holiday with them.
For anyone listening, I'm going to give a very brief kind of overview of what the film is. Our usual gang of kids at the school who are the bad kids that nobody wants to deal with except for our bright-eyed, optimistic teacher. They go on a school trip, 2 weeks at a camp out in the wilderness, in the forest, because they're inner city kids. Let's get them out into the woods, and they cause havoc there. So it's the same kind of chaos they cause at school, but in a slightly different context. I tell you what I particularly liked about this is that we have the first 20 minutes or so is just them at the school, establishing the plot, establishing our characters. And then we go to the summer camp and a few teachers go with them, as you would expect. But they don't come up with a contrived excuse to have all the teachers there and the caretaker there, Mr.
You know
Potter.
what, though? I would have liked a contrived reason to take Mr. Potter along, because I think he's by far the best thing in this. He's
that's
just
interesting.
Blakey, isn't he? Really? I mean, that's... But
let's come back to that in a second. Let's start at the beginning, because I'll be interested. What I'm really interested in here, Sol, is you as not being particularly familiar with the series, how the characters come across to you and what you think works. Because what we get in the first 10 minutes here is a really nice establishment of setting and characters, which even as someone who has watched the whole series, it doesn't feel like, oh God, we've got to get through this. It feels like just good character stuff. But to someone new, it is establishing all our basic character
And we sort of get to see some of their home lives as well, which helps to establish their characters as well. So, Dennis particularly. We see the parents, don't we?
it's character stuff that is very relevant to the storyline and moves it forward as well, which I think goes a long way. A big scene is a load of the kids tricking Mr. Potter to sign his form saying he's allowed to go on the trip.
Do you know what? That seems great.
And it's a
I
good
really
scene.
like that scene. I think it's good because it moves things forward, but it shows us how smart these kids are. They are the bottom class, they're the unruly class, they're the class that no one wants to teach. But they've got street smarts, They dupe Potter into signing Dennis's form so that he's allowed to go on the camp. They say that they're studying handwriting. Oh, that's called phrenology,
What you got there? Oh, it's just some thesis by this Russian doctor on handwriting. Reckons you can tell character from it.
Oh, yes. Yes, phrenology, that's called,
Blimey, he's right, El.
Yeah, do you reckon Uncle Norman's the person we're looking for? Oh, he is. Oh, yes, he is.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a dupe, I've had Jippo got.
Well, look, just write your name down.
Yeah.
I'll see.
But I like it because it shows us that these boys they're street smart.
Yeah. The very opening bit, we see Mr. Hedges, played by John Alderton, and Pricey, played by Richard Davis, and they're walking down the street, and Hedges is going, "Oh, I'm another glorious day going to work. I'm going to inspire the kids." And Pricey's like, "Oh, I'm going to have a drink." It's like just that 30 seconds is like, right, we've got these two characters,
know who these are.
the world-weary one and the optimistic one. I think it's really smooth, very neat. And then and then basically do that with the kids. We see them coming out, we see Frankie with being mothered by his mother, and stuff like that. It's all very simple.
Then we see when they sort of they kind of mug the lollipop man and take his lollipop and cross the road, and it's just general unruliness. Look at these kids; they're unruly. They're a liability. But can I focus in on one specific thing? We see Frankie, who's like a bit of an overgrown kid, and he's like miming machine gun in the traffic. I'm like pretend machine gun. Yeah. That's a lost art, isn't it? Now, I reckon, so what is this, 1971? That's like 26 years after the war, because that's what he's doing. He's being a Tommy. He's shooting Nazis there in his head. Like, you don't see kids shooting fake machine guns anymore.
Do you not?
It's all gangster rap handguns now, isn't
it? Is that right?
The lost art of fake machine gun in traffic I'm on it.
It's all fake stabbings with kids these days. That's what we tend to do. I particularly like the bit where Peter Cleal, who plays Duffy, who is not the oldest of the actors but looks about 45, and he's supposed to be a 16-year-old, which I assume this is a knowing kind of gag. But yeah, he's holding the lollipop sign going, "Can't you see it says stop children because we's little children, ain't we?
We's tiny tots crossing the street."
You do what, show us? Tiny tots crossing, it says here, mush. Tiny tots.
Yeah, this is right.
I mean, they must know what they're doing there, surely.
Yeah, I think by the end of 3 series and making a film now, I think now it's starting to become a bit meta.
So we talked about this in our show, Sol, but the actor is like 27 or something. But yeah, he looks 40. Like he looks like a rough 27.
Well, that's the extra layer on top of this, is that, you know, people just aged differently back then, didn't they? Although, what's the deal with, was it Wesley? The black kid in the class?
Yeah.
He's the one. Maybe this is just me being completely racist and incapable of reading ages appropriately, but he seemed like the one actor who was age appropriate.
You're right,
in that
actually.
class.
Well, is he in the series, Alan?
A couple of episodes, yeah, a couple of episodes. Okay. But no, he is brought in to play a more significant role here. But that's Brinsley Ford, and he was about 19, something like that. So
he was younger.
That's what you do, right? When you're playing 15, 16, you get a 19-year-old who looks a bit younger.
Yeah.
So that's what they've done. The problem is, and the rest of the cast don't. So he looks like a baby child.
Yeah, he sticks out like a sore thumb because he's the only age-appropriate actor in the entire group. There is so much casual racism and misogyny in this, though. I'm sure that came up on the series as well. But it was, I
think the racism's quite interesting. So
I think its heart's always in the right place.
Yeah,
it's usually
I agree.
A character
I agree.
is
there's
racist,
a scene where a Muslim character who, in order to get a little bit of a break on the journey, they encourage him to go out on the side of the A65 and say his prayers, and we get to see him doing that, which is basically a Muslim on a prayer mat doing his prayers for laughs. You know, that is it. And yes, that is not cool. However, I think that the non-white characters in this are treated respectfully by their peers.
In that scene, don't all the kids on the bus then start going oh at him while he's doing it?
That's true. but he loves it.
He's one of the gang.
Certainly Wesley, though, is one of the gang, and the only point that race really comes up with him is because he is doing a funny prank on the teacher, making like cock blocking him by making the woman think that he's racist. So, you know, that's self-aware.
Another example of racism in the film, when we talked about the parents signing disclaimers, and Frankie Abbott's mum doesn't want him to go because he's a spoilt little boy and she doesn't want him to be without him for 2 weeks. And basically he gets round it by saying, well, Wesley's going, and she's furious that this little black boy gets to go on camp and her boy doesn't, and so therefore she signs the disclaimer. So, you know, fair play to Frankie, he's got round his mum, but he's got round his mum by exposing her racism.
Yeah.
The point that comes across is these kids who have been brought up together and are just like a multicultural melting pot in London are all just get on and they have their differences and that's fine. And the parents are the bigoted ones.
Yeah.
And which I find really interesting because this is representing people who were born in the 50s. And we would have the same opinion now of our parents who were born at that age. You know, they're the ones who are a bit out of date and they don't quite get it, you know.
And having watched Game On recently, I think I wouldn't be surprised if my son thought the same about me.
Yeah, but perhaps more regards
progression
to
is progressive. It keeps
homosexuality rather than race and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And in 20 years it'll be trans stuff and all that kind of thing. It will seem totally outdated.
Well, that'll be old hat in 20 years, Alan. It'll be like AI rights in 20 years.
We also have to address as well, I think, that this was set in London, made for LWT ultimately. So if we compare this to my parents who were growing up in the 60s as teenagers, like they didn't have a multicultural melting pot. They had 99% white population in their village of miners.
There was that Chinese family that ran the takeaway. That was it.
Yeah.
That's not a joke.
Yeah, when I was a kid, there was one Chinese kid in my class, and he was the son of the guy who ran the Chinese takeaway. We do need to recognise that when we think about... Because I live in Brixton now, and the older generation here have grown up alongside people of, Caribbean descent and all sorts of other things. But the Caribbean influence in Brixton is particularly strong. And so there is this melting pot. There is this idea that we've all come from different backgrounds and we've worked out a way to get on sometimes, and that didn't come easily, but people have lived through it. People have kind of gone through all that, and like my parents, for example, haven't. So I don't find it surprising that we look at this now and go, oh, isn't that old fashioned? But actually, I know people like that. I know people who say things like that.
I mean, it is 50 years old as well, so it's sort of I think it's allowed to be old fashioned to an extent. It is old,
We've jumped ahead a little bit, but while we're talking about the parents and the signing off of the forms, can we talk about the other one? So, Dennis's parents. Now, Dennis, he's a bit stupid, but he's also very poor. That's his defining characteristic. His family are very poor, and we see that during the series. We see that the other kids look after him, and he's got holes in his clothes, all that sort of thing. Anyway, we get to see his parents because he takes his form home to be signed. His mum's signing it, and then his dad gets really angry because I signed the forms in this house. Incidentally, he is not a nice man to live with, is he? Let's be honest. But he then takes the form, but he can't read, and we find he can't read. But he won't let Dennis go because he just doesn't trust the school, he doesn't trust authority, he doesn't trust anything. And Dennis is my son, and I'll say what he can do. I think the whole time we see his mum and dad is a really tragic view into his life. Honestly, I think it's really dark. It's kind of played for laughs, but it's like that woman has got a miserable life.
Yeah, this is like this scene directed by Ken Loach.
Yeah.
And if I dare jump to the end, we'll perhaps talk about this in more detail later, but basically they get one over on him and he kind of goes off in a huff. But he goes off in a huff, grabs his wife and drags her away. She's gonna pay the price for that.
I'll jump ahead to my notes. I've jumped ahead. I've written, they've beaten him by humiliating him in front of his wife and child. He seems like the sort who would take that well.
Yeah.
What are the sort of defining personality traits of these kids, as we meet them in the show? Because I feel like that's probably more defined there.
Yeah, we see more of them in the show, so it gets a bit more defined. But they are quite clear archetypes. You've got Duffy, who's the leader. He's in charge. He's a real kind of, but he's a kind of a force of moral good. He always he makes
right. Yeah,
he's a pain in the arse, but he's a good guy. He's a good man.
And then we'll stick to the boys first. We have Frankie Abbott, who is just like a very childish and a fantasist. Malcolm McPhee plays Peter, who is the dandy. He's the one who's well dressed and gets the ladies.
I don't think you get that in this film, though.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
I think he's really underserved. You might remember from when we talked about the series, he was my favourite. Firstly, didn't like that he had his haircut. It didn't do him any favours. But then secondly, he was barely in it. He had a few lines, but he wasn't showing his character.
Well, if I may just slip into a tangent here, Malcolm McPhee at the time of filming this was doing a play. He had a very hard kind of cut-off time. He had to leave the set at a certain time to be back in London for a play. And so, yeah, he is a bit written down because he wasn't available to do all the scenes. They had to kind of work around him a little bit. Okay. Also, he's wearing a wig because for the play he had his hair cut short. So it is.
Well, if they're going to put a wig on him, why not have a proper good one?
Also, I noticed, Gareth, in the earlier scenes set in the classroom, in the show, they're all sat in very specific positions every day. In the film, Dennis and Peter have swapped places.
I noticed that too.
And I've noticed that, and it basically means that Peter is framed out in the wide shots. And I think that's because that meant they could work, if he had to leave suddenly, they could work it with a body. And there's quite a few of the sort of just general chaos scenes where you don't really see him. He's not really there.
Interesting.
So I think there's a bit of that going on. He's also probably the least kind of big character. Least big. Does that make any sense? But all the others are very distinct. I think it's partly the way Malcolm McPhee plays it. I think it's just quite subtle characterization he's doing.
That might be why he was my favourite. He was the least caricature.
Yeah.
Certainly of the boys.
But to go back to the boys, then Dennis he's poor and he's special needs, and it is very much specifically said in the series he is special education, whatever the phrases they use.
You don't have a go at Dunstable, sir. He's ESN,
And what do you understand ESN to mean?
Same as you. He's educationally subnormal, isn't he? He's a bit funny.
He's not very smart. He's a bit simple. And really what we see in the series is how much the gang rally round to help him all the time and make him feel good about himself, help him. And he's poor as well, and they all chip in to make sure he's got his PE kit and stuff like that. Did you notice at the start when he goes round to Eric's house? And first of all, Eric's house looked quite nice wallpaper. And his mum sounded a bit posh, didn't she?
His mum sounded a bit posh, but his mum was making egg and chips for Dennis, as soon as he arrived, because that felt like something she needs to do from time to time for him.
Here, you had any dinner, Dean?
And now, Eric.
Mum! Mum!
Oh, not now, dear. I'm just doing Dennis some egg and chips.
Oh, neat.
Yeah. So that is a kind of one of those things that in the show we really see, and it's used as a way of showing that these kids are really good kids and they look after each other. They look after their own a little bit, even though they feel like they're fighting against the world.
It's interesting, that dynamic, really, because I feel like the obvious thing to do here is you have a character who's a kid who's, you know, a bit of a misfit, maybe a bit bullied, or maybe just doesn't fit in, but then their arc is they come into their own and are accepted by the others. That sort of seems like what most people would do with this, and it's oddly wholesome, really, and friendly in a way that feels quite modern. How all the kids are actually quite nice to each other.
Yeah,
like they'll misbehave, but only playing up for the teachers.
That really is the general vibe of it. It's like, oh look, they're the crap kids, they're the stupid kids and the unruly kids. We put them all in this class. But actually, when you get down to it, and this teacher comes in and is this like bright-eyed, hopeful young teacher who's going, I'm gonna reach these kids and make them something, and he does, and they start to care about him, and the idea is that what we're really seeing there is that they are just normal people. They're just misunderstood for one reason or another, or they're just not academic, and so they're not being served by the system. But they're really good at this, or they're very emotionally intelligent, or they're just very good, nice people in some way. I think we have a slight slip here in the film occasionally when this happens, when they come into contact with people outside of their world. Because we have them as the underdogs all the time. They are the class in school that everyone, all the teachers like, ugh, can't be bothered with them, ugh, disgusting. And so they're always the underdogs and they're proving themselves in some way. In the film, and we get it a couple of times in the series, but in the film, we see them basically interacting with other school kids who do not much wrong, really, but they're just immediately like nasty to them and bullying them because they're a bit posh. And it loses that level of sympathy somewhat.
I agree. We saw this in the series where a kid from another class comes in and he's a bit posh and they all lay into him. And we definitely see that as they interact with the posh school. And yeah, it doesn't do them any favours as characters. They don't come out of that looking good. They pick fights.
And then and then act very offended when people sort of hit back.
Yeah. So we've talked about the boys. Let's finish off going round the kids while we're at it. So...
yes, so we have Maureen.
Which one's the one on the poster next to your face who's been very sexualized?
That's Sharon. Let's come back to that. So Maureen... Okay. Maureen is the one who's a bit more straight-laced. She's very religious. But her main characteristic is that she really fancies the teacher. And so she...
Yeah. You know what? I feel like the girls feel a lot more clearly defined in my memory of them.
It's because there's only two of them.
Yeah. But all the boys just kind of blurred into one for me, whereas the girls were, there's the one who fancies the teacher, and then there's the sexualized one.
Yeah. So we have Maureen, who is the slightly innocent one, but she really fancies the teacher as her main thing. And then we have Sharon, who, first of all, let's address it's a different actor.
Well, it's a different actor, so it's interesting to me. As Sol's pointed out, she is literally the poster girl of this film. The poster is her bending over, showing her pants. Yeah. But this is not. It's not about sexualizing children, so get over that. But nevertheless, she's showing her pants on the poster. So if you're going to have the poster girl of the film, it's the only one who wasn't in the series. It's the only cast change. Why would you have her on the poster? Oh, it's because she's got her arse out. Yes, I see.
Yeah. The actor who played her in the series was Penny Spencer, and basically when they said that we were going to do a film, they tried to get her in, she just didn't do it, and in fact when the Fen Street Gang, the series that was the continuation, she also didn't do that. She left it behind, she decided she didn't want to do any more, and frankly the career didn't really pan out. She hasn't done much else. But Carol Hawkins, she was brought in here to replace her in the film, and then also took the role as the series continued after this as well. I mean, objectively, a better actor, frankly, and she comes in and does a really good job. She just embodies the character in the same way, and you don't really notice any great difference. What I find interesting, yes, that poster, and, you know, if you want to have a look at the poster, Google it or something, but Google the poster for Police Sir. It is a very sexualized picture of a young woman. It's supposed to be Sharon. And it's a drawing, let's be clear, not a picture of her. But, yeah, with this tiny little skirt on and her pants are hanging out and all this. But there's nothing like that in the film. And it's not really in the series either, to a large extent. Certainly not from the teacher. Mr. Hedges is very teacherly to them. He's never tempted by this young schoolgirl or anything like that.
I think that's just how you marketed comedies in Britain in the 70s, that comedy and sex were interchangeable, and it was all
Carry On films, Sol, that we've established you've never seen.
it's all like Steptoe and Son and stuff were similar when we watched those films. They
Stripper.
Yeah, all of a sudden you've got a stripper as one of the main characters.
Yeah.
But aren't the posters for that very similarly like, oh, look at this saucy stripper, and the men kind of, and it's like you say, it's a painting or a drawing of them, and I don't know, you just sold everything as a sex comedy, and you're right, it's probably, I don't know, Carry On.
And we talked about this a bit in the series as well, as this character. Let's make it clear, in the series she's supposed to be 15 and 16 years old. Even though she's played by a 23-year-old. But she is sexualized by the camera and occasionally by other characters. And when it's another 16-year-old boy going, oh, she's a bit all right, isn't it? Oh, cramp it. That's kind of all right, I guess. But when it's a teacher, it's like, okay, that's not right.
Yeah.
It's interesting what you say about the camera. There's a scene early on when we sort of meet everybody in assembly, and as they leave assembly, it's very rowdy, and they all sort of running through the corridors. Hey! And the camera is at upskirt level, basically.
Yeah, and the girls are wearing these very 1960s miniskirt things. So little things like that. But I think overall in the film, there isn't really much of all that at all. Because by this point in the character setup, Sharon has started going out with Duffy. And so they're together. And indeed, in the later series, they kind of they're a proper couple and everything. And Duffy's the cock of the year, so no one's going to be messing about with his bird and all that sort of stuff. So they kind of dispense with that. And the whole thing about that character, she is not a prodigious sort of sexually overactive kind of sex pot, which is I think what they really want her to be on the posters. She is she is a girl who is attractive and therefore gets a lot of attention and has to kind of really work hard to spurn it, and she has to be careful what she does because men want her, and she has to navigate that in her life.
In fairness to men, they live in a society that advertises films by showing you a 15-year-old knickers.
So it's a difficult one, isn't it? But I mean, the posts are very misleading, frankly. It's, if you're looking for some schoolgirl pants, then you're not going to get them.
There is a sexually predatory character in the film, though, isn't there?
Yes, there is. And this is Patsy Rowlands.
Yeah, so Patsy Rowlands is a new character. She's a new teacher on the staff.
See, I was going to ask. I was wondering if this was a holdover from the series. And
she's, her characteristics are, she's got the hots for John Alderton. And we've talked about this before, haven't we? About how it's the kind of Hattie Jakes style character, where it's a coded, unattractive woman. And I don't think Patsy Rowlands is particularly unattractive, but that's how she's coded. But we see it in that assembly, in the opening scene. We're establishing the characters in this assembly. Everyone's singing "All Things Bright and Beautiful." Bernard Hedges is singing along, and Patsy Rowlands next to him, like looking up to him, gazing adoringly, like she's hanging off him like wax off a candle.
A new character for the film. It's a whole kind of bit, and I think it doesn't quite work. They set it up at the beginning, and then they have a payoff right at the very end, but it gets forgotten about in the middle because they're too busy dealing with him trying to get off with the air hostess.
Well, I wonder if there's like some deleted scenes or something, because it really feels like you're setting up scenes of her coming into his room at night in the accommodation.
It never quite happens, does it?
Yeah, or she walks in on him when he's with the other woman and gets angry or something. I don't know. But Patsy Rowlands, a nice addition. She's a bit of a sitcom legend. She's been in just about everything. It was just after this, actually, her most sort of well-known roles in terms of regular roles. She was in Bless This House, which was right after this, 1971 it started. And then she was in The Squirrels, which we've talked about, Gareth.
Yeah, we have.
In the 70s as well. And she also was in Get Well Soon, which we talked about a little bit. The Galton and Simpson in a sanatorium classic sitcom.
She's been in Carry On films as well. She was in one prior to this, previous credit, Carry On Henry.
I mean, she's your classic character comedy actor,
Yeah, and pretty much every character on her IMDb is called something like Mildred. Or, just kind of frumpy names, shall I say.
Did you notice, by the way, in the classroom scenes, in which it's not the sets that were used for the TV show, but they look very much the same. It's a nice Very kind of just crappy old school building. Yeah. But did you notice, Gareth, there was some... On the blackboard behind the teacher in the school, there was a load of sort of graffiti. The kids had gone and written stuff in chalk.
I did, but I didn't inspect it. Go on, what did I miss?
Well, one of them was like Hendrix Lives, because Jimi Hendrix had just died quite recently, I suppose. But one of the other things that it says is, hands off our milk.
Ah, Margaret Thatcher, milk snatcher.
Yeah.
God, was that going on in the 70s?
Oh, no, she was Education Secretary. Heath's government was 1970 to 74. So
that explains
So
that.
There you go, yeah.
Yeah, it was apparently Peter Cleal wrote that up on the board, one of the actors, just as a little, just his little bit of social satire. So before we leave the school and go to camp, can we talk about, well, first of all, let's have a very brief conversation about the headmaster. Did you notice there was a headmaster, Sol?
Yes.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, he's very sort of stuffy, wants to sort of be prim and proper, but you get the sense that he's actually a bit of an imbecile.
Yeah, I think you pretty much got that there. He's quite ineffectual and just sort of does whatever anyone else tells him to because he just wants to not have to make a decision.
That woman, who I assume is a teacher, is sort of running the show.
Yeah, Joan Sanderson's the deputy head, and she, so in the series, she's sort of in charge, but because she's a woman, she can't be in charge, so he just does as he's told. But in this, they take that a step further in the film by just writing him out. So Joan Sanderson goes to the camp, she is in charge at the camp, and the headmaster's just not there.
Was that the norm in the 70s? Because I feel now, while male head teachers are certainly not uncommon, I feel like the stereotypical head teacher nowadays would be a woman.
I would be very interested to see some stats on that, but I am prepared to bet you
probably
that
more primary school rather than high school.
The percentage of female head teachers versus male is lower than the percentage of all teachers that are female.
Oh, 100%, massively, yeah.
And in the 70s, it would have, yeah.
This is never actually spelled out in the series, but, she's running the show, but, well, she can't be the head teacher, surely. This guy's doing that job. Look at this old guy. Look, he's bald. He's perfect.
But that's what I find interesting is that I think nowadays you wouldn't bat an eyelid at a stuffy old woman like her being the head teacher character. You just be like,
yeah. Well, the head teacher is my least favorite character in the series. I think he's a bit crap, and so I'm very happy that they basically bookend him and then don't have him in the film.
I quite enjoyed his dynamic with Blakey. What's he called? Potter. I liked how Potter was fawning over him and preparing everything.
Well, I'm much more surprised that Potter didn't make it to the camp. I know he does quite a lot, but Potter in the series, what you see in the film is pretty much what you get in the series. He's this little ball of chaos that kind of runs around the school. And my thing with Potter was that he didn't fit. It felt like he was from a different show, a different tone of comedy.
100%. Yeah.
And okay, maybe that works as a little comic relief character. I didn't particularly care for that. He's fine, but I don't know. I wasn't interested in. So I'm quite happy that he's.
See, I think I preferred him to everything else, and I wanted everything else to fall in line with him. But I do agree with what you're saying. I'm surprised they didn't, get to the camp and there's a caretaker played by the same actor who's like his brother or something.
Oh, that would have been great.
I believe you know my brother.
I am surprised that they didn't contrive a reason to have him there, honestly. But they don't, and I find that an interesting choice because you could. Because in the series, he's always finagling his way to get onto the school trips and do things with them and stuff like that. He's always kind of
see him
out of
driving
place.
the bus or something,
Yes, exactly. Because we get a little bit of badinage with the bus driver, played by Jack Smethurst off of Love Thy Neighbour, but that doesn't really go well anyway, it just has a couple of lines.
Can I give you my favourite Potter line from the film?
Oh, God. Gareth's discovered he can do a really good Potter impression, and he loves it. He loves it.
I didn't say it was good, I said I was happy with it. It's different. So, as the bus leaves, Frankie Abbott's mum's really upset because she's losing her little boy. And she says, they had to do away with my fallopians after I gave birth to my little Frankie, He says, oh, yes. Keep jumping on the pram, did they? I laugh out loud.
Gareth can't do the impression. His lead-in has to be, oh, yes. Can't do it without it.
Churchill.
Anyway, Anyway, yeah, let's make our way to camp. And so we have a bit of antics on the trip. The kids can't even have a 2-hour bus ride without causing havoc. They manage to lose one of the kids, Wesley, who is picked up by Penny. What we get there, first of all, Wesley, we talked about Wesley briefly, but Wesley is black, and that is, very clear in this scene because he, for attention or sympathy, I guess, he really ramps up the old racism malarkey. Because, a black kid in the 70s probably didn't have enough real racist stuff to talk about, so has to make it up,
No.
Okay, whatever.
Did you get when Penny meets Bernard and she's really angry at him, saying he's disgusting? Did you get what she said? She said, Trevor Huddleston was right about people like you swine. Did you pick that? Did you know who Trevor Huddleston was?
And no, of course we don't know who Trevor Huddleston is.
He was like an anti-apartheid. He was a churchman. I don't know if he was a bishop or what, but he was a churchman. He was an anti-apartheid campaigner. So I think he was British, but he'd worked in South Africa, and he was one of the faces of that early anti-apartheid campaign.
Good guy. Are we on his side?
Although I kind of knew the name, and I knew what I just told you, but I thought I'll look him up and just, if there's any other detail that I've missed. The detail that I didn't know was that a few years after this, just 2 short years after this, he was accused of touching children. So his defence... Can I read you this might not make it to the podcast, but I like this. This is a direct quote. I have never done anything to harm a child. Neither do I consider it indecent to pat a child on the bottom or pinch him. The boys are telling the truth, but the implications of indecency are completely absurd. So there you go. All he did was touch a couple of children.
That's a pretty solid defence. Yes, I did it, but I didn't mean anything by it.
So it's up to you whether you want to leave that in, cut out the whole Trevor Huddleston riff, or just leave the first bit and make me look like a lover of paedophiles.
Hey, do you know, so the actor there playing Wesley is Brinsley Ford.
I know that name. Is that the guy from Aswad?
It is the guy from Aswad. I knew
the name. Right, I didn't know it was him when I was watching it, but when you said his name earlier, I thought, is that the same Brinsley? Okay.
Yeah, one of the blokes out of Aswad. Did you have any idea, Aswad, Sol? They're a band,
Don't
reggae
turn
group.
around,
I thought, yeah.
as you're gonna see my heart breaking.
I don't know any of the songs as far as I know.
I think that might be the only one I know.
So they had 2 hits, and I listened to them, and oh yeah, I've heard this. So I bet you would have heard them. The other one is Shine, shine like a star,
shining so bright like the star that you are. It's a classic.
Anyway, that's so that's him when he was a teenager, obviously before he got into the band. That whole bit where she thinks Hedges is a racist and she confronts him, and then they meet again later in the pub and she kind of has a go at him there, and then it's immediately diffused. Where again, that feels like something that should be going on all the way, and then is figured out at the end.
Can you believe a pub was serving those children?
You only challenge them if they look under 25. That's the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
All this camp stuff, under different circumstances, it's got all the ingredients of a good porno. You've got adults playing teenagers. They're all stuck together in camp. There's older people playing teachers. I mean, it's good stuff. Disciplinarianism.
You know, our mum is going to text us about that.
Well, kind of on that level, we have the camp scene set up. All the boys are in one hut, all the girls are in the other hut. But I guess this is a pre-Animal House. We have no shenanigans of trying to sneak over into the...
The only shenanigans that are even suggested is Patsy Rowland's trying to sneak out to get to Hedges.
Yeah, I did think, they're setting up the kind of, like you say, the US college movie tropes here, and then it doesn't do anything with it, but yeah.
And we have another character established here, although, again, it doesn't really go anywhere, but it's Norman Bird as the camp warden, who is there to be a kind of voice of authority of the camp.
He's there to be Potter.
Well, yeah, but they don't do anything with it. He's filling
the same role as Potter, albeit he's not doing the same... he's not as good. The character is not as good. He's the foolish face of officialdom.
But Norman Bird, Norman Bird's a classic comedy actor. He was in Ealing comedies back in the day and all that. Loads of sitcom guest appearances. Do you recognise him, Gareth?
Yeah, I do, but I was kind of waiting for you to reel something off there that I know him from, but I definitely do know him, yeah.
The one thing I thought, I don't know if Gareth recognised him from that, he's in Wurzel Gummidge.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, I did watch that when I was little, but I was very...
So I thought you might know him from that. But yeah, he's one of those people, he's been in a bit of everything, yeah. A bit like Patsy Rowland, Here's another thing, just in terms of plot and structure and stuff. We get quite a lot of stuff at the school. It's quite a significant first act. And so we have less time at the camp to really play things out. And they have this kind of half-hearted, oh, we get stars for good behaviour and, oh, we're not getting many stars thing. But we don't have the obvious, okay, everyone has to come together because it's the final competition and we have to beat the posh school and all that sort of stuff. It's all a bit kind of limp and half-hearted plotting. But it's every 80s American kids film like Ernest Goes to Camp, right? It's the underdogs, the scrappy like losers club come together and prove themselves.
You want a big confrontation against the posh school at the end, where our brave underdogs overcome.
And we don't really have that, but they do. But we kind of have that, but with no structure in the sense of they're doing a bit crap, and then they go, oh, we better be nice because the teacher's put his neck on the line, so let's do something nice. And then they're nice for a bit. There's a lot of disparate elements here that kind of work as a whole, but
a lot's going on.
Never feels like we're leading anywhere. It just sort of finishes.
Speaking of disparate elements, shall we talk about Nobler?
The kid who turns up an hour and 10 minutes into the film and becomes a crucial part of the conclusion.
Yeah, puts his arm around Maureen like he's claimed her, even though he's 7, and he actually is 7.
Yeah,
he's not 27
actually
playing
is a
7.
child playing a child.
Yeah,
but Dennis, they're out in the woods somewhere, and Dennis wanders about. He befriends an encampment of gypsies who are living in the woods or whatever they're doing. And then he befriends a young boy of, I don't know, what is he, 11, called Nobler. And so Nobler becomes friends with them. He's just accepted in the world. The teachers let him in the camp.
So yeah, they just take him into their group and look after him. Even though, I think it's a very important point, he's a little shit.
Yeah.
Like he's a rude little shit. And they're like, oh, he's cute, ain't he?
But that's how the world sees them, Gareth. And so then they see him and they go, oh yeah, he's just a misunderstood little kid. He's one of us. He wants to fight us. And like even when he claims Maureen as his love, and Frankie Abbott is like, oh, that's my tot. You see, he's just like them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he tries to get off with Maureen. She kind of says, well, no, I'm too old for you. I'm 16. But he, on her behalf, enacts revenge upon the posh kids. Hang on, what did Peter call them? Hang on, I wrote this down. Toffee-nosed red blazer gits, the posh kids are.
Yeah. That is an accurate description.
They want to get revenge on them for some shenanigans, but they can't because they'll get in trouble. And so Nobler takes it upon himself to do it on their behalf and steals some money and plants it in their changing rooms so that they end up getting blamed for it anyway. So it's all kind of pointless. But it gives us a chance to have our conclusion where Hedges trusts his kids. When they say they didn't do this, he believes them, and therefore we have a mutual respect all round. And that's kind of what the whole core of the series is really them occasionally having misunderstandings but ultimately learning to trust each other.
So Hedges then goes to find the gypsy encampment to accuse some gypsies of stealing. And did you like his phrase? I'm looking for your sagamore. You heard that word before? Sagamore?
No.
It's doubly offensive because not only is it a bit of a slur, but it's the wrong ethnic group. A sagamore was like I'm going to say a Red Indian chief because that's what they would have said in 1971. Whatever you want to call it now.
But I think that's deliberately played for laughs, like he's just so out of place he doesn't know.
Yeah, but he's trying, isn't he? He's trying to be respectful.
Yeah. That's our conclusion, really. They kind of get their comeuppance, and then we have a bit of a conclusion with Dennis's parents and that whole bit we sort of talked about earlier.
I feel like the start of this film in the school is all fairly decent, and then it kind of loses its way a bit when they actually get on the holiday, when they actually get to the camp. It just sort of starts to meander and lose its way. And it's weird because that's kind of the whole point of the film is they're going to camp.
But that's what I mean. I think it's lacking a bit of structure. It needs that kind of and then we need to win the competition at the end and get the gold star kind of vibe. You know, I think it is just a little bit sketchy. And you know, again, how often do we encounter this? People who are normally right for a 24-minute
But we're approaching this. I think we might be approaching this wrong. We're asking Sol, "What do you think?" Having not seen the series, but that's actually not the right approach, because pretty much everyone who would have sat in the cinema to watch this would have seen the series.
You reckon? I think a lot of these films go out of their way to attract a new audience as well as a audience familiar with the show. Certainly nowadays, that would be the approach. Generally.
Well, yeah, but it's not nowadays. It's 1971, and there's 2 channels.
I feel like it was more the approach in the old days because, that's why they would just partly just remake stuff so you didn't have to be, and not set it in the same continuity as the show so you could go in fresh, surely.
Well, I think I don't know. I think they've done a reasonably good job of setting up the characters here, but I would argue that it's probably less important than if it was a whole set of original characters who no one knew.
Yeah.
Can I talk about one other thing that's totally tangential if we've finished with the film, pretty much? I have here a copy of Please Sir, The Official History by David Barry, signed to me by his good hand. We talked about this in the series. I used this as a pretty detailed reference for what we talk about. So I thought, I'll read the bit about the film again. There's a little chapter about the film. Not a great deal of details other than what we've already talked about. But one of the things he mentions during it is that after filming one day, during all this time, they got chatted up by some sort of sleazy salesman guy who said, "Hey, look, I've got some studio time. Come down, we'll record a Please Sir cast single, and we'll release it. We'll all make a fortune." And so they did that. It was during the filming of the film, and they did it after filming. But then Malcolm McPhee had to go and do his theatre show, so they didn't even start recording until 11 o'clock at night. They were there all night. They'd been up all day filming. They were all drunk and sleepy and pissed off, and so in these circumstances, they created a song and recorded a single. And the guy was a bit of a slick salesman, and it was all a bit dodgy, and I don't know what came of it. It certainly didn't sell that well. But there is a Please Sir cast single.
Wow.
Do you want to hear it?
Yes.
We are a phone called 5C. It's a bad place for teachers to be, 'cause we give them lots of trouble and we do it at the double. We're the worst phone you could ever see. Bernard Edges makes us work, but we all like to shirk. So we give him merry help, but he treats us pretty well, so he must be quite a bird. Please, sir.
And Maureen have a little cry.
Please, sir.
Craven, give that dolly a try.
Please, sir. Can Abbott be a private eye? Please, sir. Please, sir.
Bad.
Every type of bad singing on show there.
That is poorly written, but made up for with even worse execution.
To say it sounds like they wrote the thing within a couple of hours from the sounds of it. Could be a lot worse.
I'm not sure who wrote it, because Malcolm McPhee is one of the credited writers.
I
saw
saw that on the
lyrics.
YouTube page. I saw McPhee. I wondered if it was him.
Yeah, and the B-side, which is even worse, is credited to Peter Denyer as well. So that's...
Oof.
Yeah.
I have one more note here, which is a little bit of a tangent. We did talk about this when we talked about the series. Corporal punishment. There are a lot of clips around the ears. There's a slipper. It's just really incongruous, isn't it? It's never nasty. It's just like just all part of disciplining these kids. Just a little smack here and a belt round the ear there and a grab him by the ear and pull him out of assembly over there. It's just normal.
Do you know what? Speaking of Bishop Huddleston earlier, that bit where he just pats Malcolm McPhee on the bottom with a slipper.
Yeah.
It definitely was like...
He threatens him with the slipper.
You need to hit him hard or it's weird.
He threatens him with a slipper, and Malcolm McPhee does as he's told anyway, so it's like a good lad. Little tap on the bum with the slipper, good lad.
That was when I made the porno note, I think.
I'm just going to read that again. I've never done anything to harm a child. It is not indecent to pat a child on the bottom or pinch him. So there, just corporal punishment.
Okay, so I think we've dealt with the Please Sir film spin-off there. Yes, the series carried on for a couple of years after, in some sort of way. This was its height, really. This was its peak. But I think, perhaps Gareth, you can speak to this as well. In terms of series to film transition, I think they do a pretty good job here. I think we get We get all the ingredients, we get the same spirit, and we get, considering there's no laugh track and there's no audience here, I don't feel like it misses that. It feels like the rhythm is still good, the pace is good.
You know what? That's a really good point. Yeah,
I think that is a good point. I hadn't actually registered there was no laugh track, but that's the point. I hadn't noticed.
Normally, it's glaringly obvious in these things, even when they kind of work. But yeah,
I enjoyed watching it. I like that Sol enjoyed watching it because I'm always curious how would it go if you didn't know the character, if you hadn't seen the series. But I do think my main criticism is it did miss Potter.
I wouldn't say it was great. Let's put that.
I did miss Potter. I think he's a big miss. I think he is a little incongruous in the world. I don't disagree with you about that, but he is part of the world. He is an integral part of the show. And yeah, we were just missing him for the whole second act.
I should just make this fairly clear for you, Sol, in terms of when we looked at the series. We didn't come out of that going, oh yeah, that was a really good show. It's fairly crap. It's a bit crap. But you know, this I think this film is quite a good example of it at its best. You know, all those characters working together.
What I know of the show, it seemed like a good translation. I agree with you, and I think for what it is, it's not bad. I've seen much worse British sitcom movies than this, but I would stop short of saying it's good even.
But yeah, I think overall it works very nicely. A good transition and a nice send off for our original cast, really.
Yeah. Well, I think we have wrung all the juice out of this film, so thanks everyone for listening. This is the British Sitcom History Podcast. You can see us, you can find us on social media. We're on Twitter and Instagram at BritCompod, or on Facebook. If you look at British Sitcom History Podcast, you'll find us.
And you can go to our YouTube, search for British Sitcom History. You'll find us there, in which you can find the podcast with video accompaniments, some clips and things, but also some just purely video content that is up on the YouTube, including what we like to call Sitcom Spotlight, in which we look at actors and sort of see the sitcom appearances from their careers, just little highlight reels. And I have done one, which will be coming out soon, on the cast of Please Sir. The Fen Street kids, actually, the kids from Fen Street, and their sitcom appearances.
And what else?
And I sort of conglomerated them all into one. So that'll be going up on the YouTube
great. I look forward to seeing
fairly soon after this goes out. So have a look at that.
Thanks for joining us, Sol. It's been great to talk to you.
It's all right. Thanks for having me.
And thank you, Alan. And we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.